Welcome, I'm Jerry Willis. Tonight, how the Obama White House is spinning today's disastrous job numbers. My 2 cents in just a minute. Plus, that stunning jobs report sends stocks reeling and economists scratching their heads. So, are there solutions? Yes, and we have them. Also, is Obama pushing shovel-ready part 2? Yes, he is. Governor Mike Huckabee helps us dig into the latest news. And the end of the era for a great American icon, the space shuttle. But a new beginning as well. All that and more tonight on the Willis Report. If there were any doubt about the importance of this jobs crisis, after today, there can be no debate. You know the headlines. The jobless rate at 9.2% in June, a measly 18,000 jobs created. But that's not all. Buried in today's Labor Department report, the tragic results. Since we began tracking jobs 63 years ago, the average amount of time the American workers have stayed unemployed is 13.89 weeks, or 3.5 months. Today, it's 39.9 weeks, or just shy of a full year at 10 months. Fewer people are even in the labor force, just 64%, the lowest in 27 years. But the administration has a plan. President Obama talked about it from the Rose Garden this morning, and guess what? He wants to spend more of your taxpayer dollars to put construction workers on the public dole. We tried that before, spending $666 billion in stimulus that created anemic economic growth and failed to solve the jobs dilemma. Will more of the same just be a panacea? This administration is a one-trick pony, and that's not enough. We need new solutions to a problem that is growing worse, not getting better. But that's my 2 cents. Joining me now, David Walker, the former U.S. Comptroller General and the founder and CEO of Come Back America Initiative. Elaine Chao, the former Labor Secretary under George W. Bush. And Henry Nothhaft, the author of Great Again, Revitalizing America's Entrepreneurial Leadership. We've got a dynamite panel here. Thanks to everybody for coming in. Really appreciate it. Elaine, to you first. We've talked about this many times, this jobs problem. What do you make of today's numbers?
Well, there's nothing that can be said to try to bolster these numbers. This is an extraordinarily disappointing report. In fact, the consensus expectation was that it was going to be a much better report. 90,000 jobs are going to be created. I mean, there's no way to spin this. I think the lesson here is that the government has done enough. And to improve the economy and to rebuild the capacity for jobs, the government has got to stop what it is doing, because clearly it is not working. If the stimulus worked, we should be in an economic boom by now. And clearly, all the steps that the government has taken were short-term, they're artificial, and consumers and investors can see that. And these are not sustainable long-term actions to create new jobs.
Henry, to you, you write about solutions to the jobs problems. I look at this duration, the amount of time people spend unemployed, 10 months. I mean, it's so hard to ever become a viable job candidate again when you're unemployed almost a year. What do you make of those numbers?
Well, it's absolutely true. And if you look at our time to recover from recessions, it's been extending as well. The first 5 recessions after World War II, it only took 7 months for us to regain the level of employment that we had in the country prior to the beginning of the recession. Recent recessions then, 2002, took 31 months. And this one looks like it's going to be 7 or 8 years until we reach the previous level of employment. And so what is happening here, we have a systemic unemployment problem in the United States, and people continue to look to short-term transient solutions to solve the problem. And so during this period of time, say since 2001 until today, the workforce has grown by 10 million. We've only employing 2.5 million more people in that time frame, and we've offshored 6 million manufacturing jobs during this time frame, losing 2 million since 2008.
It's just a terrible track record, really. David Walker, to you. Now, as U.S. Comptroller General, you saw a lot of these reports come out. What do you make of this one? Were you surprised by just how bad the numbers were?
Well, it clearly is extremely disappointing, and you can't try to spin it. The bottom line is Washington's grown too big, promised too much, waited too long to restructure. We need to engage in comprehensive tax reform and regulatory reform. We need to provide much more certainty. The truth is our infrastructure is in terrible condition, and we need to dramatically reform it, but we don't need more of the same. And, you know, frankly, Washington's dysfunctional. It has no plan to be able to deal with deficits and debt. The Transportation Trust Fund is going to be insolvent within the next year. We're subsidizing that with general revenues. I'm going to have a plan coming out on July 20th that's going to provide a path forward, because let me tell you, we could have a debt crisis in this country within the next 2 to 3 years that would be a much worse situation than we have now if Washington doesn't wake up and start making choices soon.
David, you should come back and share that with us when you do it. Meanwhile, let's keep talking about this jobs report for just a minute. Elaine, I remember during the George Bush administration, there was one point, beautiful, bright, shining moment during the Bush administration where unemployment was 4.2%. We can't even imagine that now. Why is it so different now? Can we get back to those days? How do we do it?
Well, you know, the average unemployment rate was indeed that much lower, and this administration is trying to say that there's a new norm and that we've got to get used to an unemployment rate in excess of 9%, and that is simply not true. The economic conditions are affected greatly by government policies, and if the government spends too much, borrows too much, taxes too much, and also regulates too much, there's an impact on the economy. I think the people in Washington and the White House today really believe that they control the economy, and that's just so wrong, because it's the private sector that creates jobs. The government's role, the proper role of government, is to create the environment through which job creation can occur through the private sector. And so we've got to restore trust and confidence in the private sector. And that means, again, you know, we've got to stop having the government spend so much, tax so much, borrow so much, and regulate so much. And there is a moment of action right now. The whole deficit, the debt ceiling issue is right front and center in our national debate. And it is ludicrous for the Democrats to suggest that this is a time to increase taxes. Increased taxes will only add to the burden of small businesses and businesses everywhere, which create the jobs. What we need to do in order to come to an agreement on the debt ceiling is to cut and make sure that the government is being fiscally responsible with its own financial house. And that means that we've got to restore fiscal sanity.
You know, Elaine, so much work to be done, obviously, and interesting points. But Hank, you made a point I thought also was very compelling. You said a lot of what we've tried to do is short-term and transitional in nature and really doesn't go to the long-term problems of employment in this country. You say manufacturing needs to be ramped up. How do we do that, and why is it so important to get manufacturing going?
Well, manufacturing is the holy grail, because for every manufacturing job that is in the United States, it has the ability to create 2 to 15 additional jobs in the ecosystem supporting those manufacturing jobs. So you could do the math on that. If we've lost 6 million manufacturing jobs and they create 2 additional jobs, that's 12 million additional jobs, or we would be nearly full employment. And so it's really the disincentives of multinationals to locate employees offshore. They have created 2.9 million jobs offshore in the last 10 years, while eliminating 2.4 million jobs in the United States. So we need to do some things like repatriating the $1 trillion plus in cash offshore held by the multinationals right now. That is one of the most impactful things that could be done in the short term to infuse the economy with private funds to restore some energy.
Government action matters here. Let me
just get David in here quickly, because I want to hear more from him. And I really want him to respond to something the president just said, and it goes to this debt ceiling that he was just talking about. Here's the president.
The sooner that the markets know that the debt limit ceiling will have been raised, and that we have a serious plan to deal with our debt and deficit, the sooner that we give our businesses the certainty that they will need in order to make additional investments to grow and hire.
So the president knows that, but it doesn't seem like we're getting any traction on this problem.
Well, I think ultimately we're going to reach a deal, because we have to reach a deal. This country is spending $4 billion a day, every day, including weekends, more than it's taken in. We do not want to take the risk of seeing what will happen to the markets and interest rates if we're in a position of trying to decide what bills we're going to pay and which ones we're not going to pay. That's absolutely outrageous. And, you know, let's understand this. Revenues in the United States right now are less than 15% of GDP, whereas the historical average has been 18.2. So we've got revenues of less than 15%. We've got spending at 25%. Spending is the primary problem,
Okay.
but tax expenditures should be on the table.
All right. Well, I appreciate all of you guys coming in today. David, Elaine, Hank, thanks so much for your time. Great roundtable, great information. Thank you.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
All right.